Is this thing still on? Are we still doing this? Is this working? Are we all right? It's been so long since I did this. It's been so long since I had all this equipment lined up this way. I'm not entirely sure I remember what all the buttons are. So if I seem a little janky with this, please know that I don't mean to be. I also want to apologize. I realize I didn't post today's audio in 3 for 30, so I'll double up tomorrow for sure. Other than that, I hope you're doing well. It's been busy and chaotic and crazy, and maybe that'll come up tonight. Who knows? We'll see. Okay, let's do this thing, shall we? Yeah.
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
What the fuck is that?
Hey, yo.
Let's go while we're young.
All right, so you can all watch me fix this in real time because I just didn't know. So bear with me a minute. Actually, we're gonna have to go back to the title screen. Hang on. Just while I fix this, hang on. I hate when it does this. It's not that fixable otherwise. So, how are you? Are you doing okay? Everything good? You know, staying out of trouble? I'm just really filling time here. I sincerely apologize for having to do this, but I need to fix it. So give me a second, and we will go forward in a moment. Eventually, kind of, sort of. Hang on a minute. Let's go over here and turn that off and off. And do that. And it should be okay. I think. Possibly. Maybe. I don't know. Let's find out. Close it. And now we will come back. All right. That was it. It does this randomly. I don't know if it's because I don't use it like frequently enough, or if it's just persnickety, or if I'm supposed to be setting up a different a different kind of opening. But hello, hi, how are you? I hope you're well. It's been ages, years, ice ages, geologic periods since I spoke to you last, and it is really my pleasure to be back here again. The camera's over here now. I'm so used to it being here. I've moved it here. We're going to give this a try tonight. Who knows? Shall we do the intro? You want to get started? So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, writers, pals, non-binary friends, other people, makers, writers, dreamers, doers, creatives, hurricane enthusiasts, hurricane survivors, beverage likers, ad listeners, break takers, anybody who's worked really hard, anybody who's ever done a thing after a really long break and they kind of forget how it is they're supposed to be doing stuff, anybody who's ever been just a little overwhelmed with the chaos and the busyness of the day, and most importantly, the comrades. This is the Writer's Chat for September the 28th. Yes. Yeah, we'll go with that. Yes, it's the 28th. Nailed the date. Nice. Good job, me. And yeah, we seem to be rocking and rolling on all fronts. If this is the first time you're checking this out, oh boy, howdy. It's been a hot minute. I'm John. Hi. I'm Twitch's only writing coach. I'm not the only writer on Twitch, but I am the only person who gets on Twitch on the regular and answers questions from writers about writing and editing and publishing and marketing and how to get your stuff going and how to sell your stuff and really how to do it better. Because I don't know if you know this, there's a ton of material out there. Like if you just start Googling or you dive deep into social media, you find a lot of people who are trying to sell you really shitty solutions to really straightforward problems. I'm disinterested in that. I want nothing to do with that. Instead, I just want to help you do what you want to do through ways, means, and tools that are easy for you. Because this shouldn't be all that magical. This shouldn't be all kept behind a curtain. This shouldn't be something you have to decode with a decoder ring or something you've got to like hand over large sums of money to do. I believe everybody should tell their story. Everybody should have the means to tell their story, and people should be able to make art as frequently as possible and as well as possible all the time. If you're okay with that, if that sounds like a good thing for you, welcome. If that sounds totally surprising to you, well, okay. This is how we do things here. It's nice to see you all tonight. Tonight, I got a thing for you. Tonight is kind of sort of brought to you by Sprecher Brewery. SprecherBrewery.com, makers of amazing beverages. I can strongly recommend two, and I'd like to tell you about them now. Sprecher Root Beer is by far the best root beer in the country. I agree with 4 out of the 7 reviews that make it the best root beer in the nation. And the fire roasted grape soda. If you've never had a grape soda, or you can only really think of the really oily stuff that Fanta produces and it makes you think it's grape soda, fire roasted grape soda in an ice cold glass will change your life. All those things and more. An amazing orange soda. A great variety case. If you want to dip your toes into the world of novelty beverages, SprecherBrewery.com. Milwaukee's own Sprecher Brewery. They were nice enough to talk to me on social media for a while, to bounce some ideas back and forth, to provide me with some things. So they're not a direct sponsor of this evening's writing chat. This is not a hashtag ad, not an ad. But they are certainly more than happy to have me talk about their stuff in exchange for my enjoying their beverages. And that's what we're doing today. So, Sprecher, give them a chance. That's the ad break. I don't have any ad copy. They were like, it's not really an ad. We don't have that much money, because I asked for some money. We don't have that much. We'll just, essentially give you beverages, which is fine for me. I'm very happy to have more beverages than I know what to do with. There's a whole extra case over there on the floor. But it's not an ad. Don't freak out, Twitter machine and Twitch device. Not an ad, not sponsored. We're just friends. Shall we get started, though? Shall we? On we go. Sprecher. They're nice on social media. Go check them out. And on to question number 1. What are some things that I can work on to help get better at pacing my plot? Well, the problem with this question, first of all, the question's fine. Let's be clear. The question's fine. The problem is that people ask about pacing all the time as if it were a universal thing, as if everybody's going to have the same pacing problems, and no matter what you're writing, the pacing is always going to be handled the same way. It's just not that. It doesn't work like that. It's not going to work like that. It didn't work like that yesterday. It's not going to work like that tomorrow. Pacing your plot comes down to you understanding how things are, here's your technical term, deployed. Deployment is different than development, but the two things work together. So deployment is when you introduce a thing in text. Doesn't matter if that's exposition or grammar or dialogue or lore, or you state a fact or you make a discovery. The how of it is not really relevant right now to our discussion. You can get lost in the weeds when you talk about what kind of deployment is better than the other, but for the majority of people who are asking about pacing issues, this is not a concern. But development is where you take a thing you've deployed and add to it, put more words to it. Not necessarily the same words repeated, but just more words to it. So if we were going to talk about how the house was built in 1910 and the first ghost was seen in 1911, we've deployed that idea. But if we were to develop it, we would then probably say more about the ghost specifically, or add to the timeline, or describe the house, or do something house-related. Okay? Pacing your plot has to do with your ability to understand what you're developing, why you're developing it, and how far into the book, so over the course of the text, you're deploying things. Because there's going to come a point in the first act and the second act where you're totally fine. Roll out all the things you want. However, here's the thing to pay attention to. Too far into the second act, meaning too close to the climax. And I mean like turn the page, the next thing is the climax. Too close to the climax and your deployment feels forced. Because we're supposed to be ramping up to the climax. We're supposed to be building and building and building. And if you start dropping bigger and bigger things, bigger plot information, bigger twists, bigger setups, it's all going to feel very rushed, as if that's the thing that's driving us to the climax, not the accumulated knowledge prior to that. So if we're talking about this haunted house, right? And we've been laying out different ghosts and different cases and different rooms and different things. And we've built up our hero to go in there and she's going to deal with our stuff. If all of a sudden we suddenly reveal that her grandmother owned the house and that comes out of nowhere, then our problem is going to be that this detail about grandma is now suddenly the thing that's driving us to the climax. Now, maybe that's what you want because your story is feeling a little loose and a big detail later in the story is going to help pull it together. I'm going to tell you to avoid doing that, though, because it's going to feel really weird and kind of like TV movie of the week cheap for laying out your story. So try and keep your facts developed or deployed first and developed in a reasonable, orderly, accumulative way. This, plus that, plus that, over and over and over. Going up a staircase is a better way to deploy things than randomly just dropping the big thing in and hoping it just no one notices that, oh my God, the story all of a sudden took this like hard right turn all of a sudden. Controlling your pacing also means understanding how many things you have to bring up before you go from, here's the plot to there's the climax. The number of things you include, I'm going to generalize this number. The vast majority of people have too many goddamn things going on in their story. Too many things. You don't need 15. You don't need 12. You don't need this and this and this and that and this and that and that. Just because, it's going to be a series and I'm going to try to get... Stop. If you're writing a series and you're about to tell me that you need to do all this breadcrumb laying to set up the later books, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Because if you're going to be traditionally published in a series, the only way you're going from book 1 to book 2 is if book 1 sells well. And if you fatten up book 1 like a foie gras goose, and you fatten the thing up to where the story feels pendulous and slow and just overblown, it's not going to sell well. It's not going to review well. The publisher's not going to have a reason to give you book 2 no matter what. If you're self-publishing and you're kind of using the metric and the measure of, hey, people are buying my book, I better keep making this series. A book that's fat, slow, pendulous, weighty, and lopsided in its development isn't going to get reviewed well. It's going to be harder to sell, and you're going to run into the same problem. Don't overload your reader. Now, that doesn't mean swing the other way either and suddenly do the barest minimum like we're telling like the haiku of stories, because that's not what I'm talking about. There's a really big sweet spot from like development of 2 or 3 things to development of like 10 things where you can cover a lot of ground, independent of genre, independent of writing style, all that. Just be organized about it. Just be organized about it. That's all you need to do. Organization is everything when you are controlling the pacing, because it's going to come down to how you write it. It's going to come down to how long are your paragraphs? How many sentences do you have per paragraph? Are they long sentences? Are they run-ons? Are you just throwing out walls of text and hoping that they stick? How are you getting the information across to the reader? How effectively, not efficiently, effectively are they turning the page? Keep reading, keep on the edge of their seat, keep engaged. That's going to help you sort out your pacing. And if you are moving too quickly from story thing to story thing, oh, here's this idea. Oh, there's that idea. Oh, there's this idea. You're going to run into a situation where the story never really feels like it gets to a point where it can plateau and then advance, because you just keep adding more shit to it. Don't. Just don't. Slow down, organize, and if you write clearly, I don't mean Spartanly. I don't mean sparingly. Clearly. I mean, like, you don't take 55 sentences to do what you can accomplish in 4. If you write clearly, pacing will sort itself out. Stop micromanaging it, and you're going to do a lot better with pacing. What a great first question. Second question. Why are some tenses a better fit for some genres and not others? This question's horseshit. It's just horseshit. Say it right there. This question's bad. You can write any genre in any tense. Any tense. Doesn't matter. There are some genres that are more frequently written in some tenses, usually in past tense, but that's because writers have an easier time in past tense. But no one genre owns one tense, and no one genre owns one point of view. There's a reason why detective stories are always written in first person, but that's because we're trying to create a sense of claustrophobia. We're trying to create a sense of familiarity between reader and detective, and we're trying to get all the character development of that flavor out of the way and keep the focus on the mystery and keep us close to it. But you can tell a detective story in third person. Ed McBain did all the time. Some tenses are better fit isn't so much a function of the genre, it's how you're writing. If you're just writing poorly, like if you're fattening this thing up and dragging it out, or going the other way and really starving your sentences and starving your paragraphs, and you're not doing your most important job, which is taking the information that's in your head and getting it onto the page, if you're skipping that because you know what you mean, so you assume somebody who isn't you also knows what you mean, and you're forgetting that every sentence is a camera, then yeah, your tense, no matter what tense you're writing in, isn't going to feel like it's a good fit. This comes down to sentence construction. This comes down to paragraph construction. It has nothing to do with, trying to follow some recipe or trying to fill the template and just tick the boxes. Oh, I'm writing in this tense because I'm writing in that genre and I want to accomplish this goal. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Write in whatever tense you want. Write in whatever POV you want. Do so effectively, please. Don't suddenly screw it up. Don't make it worse. But all the same, you can use any tense you want for whatever genre you want. In fact, if you see that a certain genre is frequently written in one tense, maybe you're the person who's going to do different. Nothing wrong with that at all. Give it a try. Great question. On we go. Question number 3, a marketing question. What's the worst part about newsletter marketing? I'm going to get a mouthful of tea because, hang on. By and large, the worst part of newsletter marketing is having enough things to say on the regular. Too many people, in an effort to just get all ramped up and grow their email list and do what all the things say, start off real strong. They get their little welcome sales funnel. They get their first 2 newsletters out. They know what to write when there's a big thing coming. But in the middle of the slog, when we're months away from finishing a draft and we're deep in the weeds with figuring out the revisions or something, those newsletters tail off and disappear. The hard part about newsletter marketing is consistency. Knowing what to write when you don't have a big thing to push or promote. It just comes down to having something to say. because your newsletter isn't only there to act as a functional billboard for your upcoming sale. You know that, right? You get it? Your newsletter is there to constantly reinforce, build, and develop new connections between you and the person who subscribed. And you don't only have to talk about, the fact that you are X number of days between launches of new thing, or that, your pre-sale's available over here, or that somehow, some way, if they're not already following you on social media, they can follow you. You can talk about anything. You want to offer up a cookie recipe because you flat out don't know what else to say. You can find a way to, bring somebody around from, hi, I know you're here to read about my book, but, it's been a slow day. I've had some really hard trouble. Here's a couple paragraphs about, writer's block. And I have found that one of the best ways to deal with writer's block might be Sprecher Brewing, but more than likely, it has to do with cookies. So here's my recipe for cookies. Something like that can be effective. Something like that can help humanize you. Something like that can be a useful tool when it comes to talking to people. You don't only want to get into a situation where the newsletter magically appears just because you have something on sale. Don't do that. Be more consistent. Be better than that. Think about all the junk mail you get in your physical mailbox or in your email inbox, where they only really seem to be always selling you 30% off, 20% off. Here's your discount code. Get it before it expires. Yap. You want to do better than that. You should do better than that. You need to do better than that, because you don't want your newsletter tossed out with, the 15 other stupid newsletters from various stores you patronized once and then never went back to. The worst part is consistency. And that's going to get fought or dealt with planning. Figure out several days in advance, what am I going to put in the newsletter? What am I going to say this week? Write it down. Write it down. Take 5 minutes. Make some notes. Here. Right here. Newsletter. Write it down. Add to it a little bit over time so that when it comes time to write your newsletter, on whatever day or the night before or whenever you write it, you know what you're going to say. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're not carving the American novel in the newsletter. But at the same time, it should be organized so that you're not sitting there going, oh, God, I only have 200 words. What am I going to do? No, have a plan. Write it down. Get that consistency, build that habit, do something with it, and it'll come. You don't have to just hope that you luck into a topic 2 minutes before you press, launch or something. Make sense? Everybody good? Do we have any questions from any of the, oh my God, that's a lot of people, fine people in chat? Hello, chat. I hope you're doing well. If you want to say hi to YouTube in the future, that's what's up. If you're about to ask me what tonight's tea is, it is this kind of gingery thing going on. It's from Twinings. My neighbor got it for me. She meant well. It's Twinings Ginger Adaptogen Focus. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. Hello. It's I like it. I don't think I should be having it at like 7 something in the evening, but because I'll probably be awake for a couple hours at this point. But it's damn tasty. It's got kind of like a tea meets ginger ale vibe, or a tea meets ginger beer vibe. I dig it. I dig it a lot. But I also have Sprecher. I got a whole pile of them in the fridge and a whole case behind me, and I'm pretty pleased about that. But do we have any questions about anything? Somebody asked me in a meeting this week what sort of questions you were allowed to ask. You can ask anything you want. People just ask me about tea. Like, you can ask anything. How do I write this? How do I sell this? What about this? How do I deal with XYZ thing? You can ask anything you want. Whatever you want to know about how to better craft and shape your art so that you can do whatever you want to do with it, totally fair game. Okay? Never feel like it's a stupid question. Always ask anything and everything you want, anytime. Nothing? Shall we march on? Shall we? Let's. Question number 4. If I were going to start blogging tomorrow, yeah, that's great. You should. What would my first 3 steps be? I have to assume that you've already figured out where you're going to blog, whether that's on your own stuff like a WordPress website or a Wix or a Squarespace or something like that. I've got to assume you've got that squared away already, because if not, that's a step before your first 3 steps. So you got to know where to blog. And if you're doing it on something else like Medium, let's say, make sure you got that all signed up and squared away. All right. But once you know where you're going to blog, you got to figure out a couple things. The first thing you need to figure out is, what am I going to blog most about? Most frequently about? What identity do I want to project through my blog? I'm going to blog about X. What's your X? For me, over at Medium, that's johnhelpsyouwritebetter.medium.com. I talk about writing advice. I talk about how to write better. I talk about how to balance creativity in a writing career and getting it off the ground. And I, just like this, help you write better. That's my X. Now, there are also some times where you don't want to only talk about X because there's other things on your mind or there's something that comes up and you want to have a little bit of flexibility. So we're going to call those Y and Z, things that could come up periodically sometimes that are interesting to you and sort of related to X. Not necessarily, but they're sort of related enough that you're comfortable also speaking about them. For me, that's things like mental health. That's things like addiction. That's also things like wrestling and pop culture. All things that sort of part of what I communicate about, how I use them to communicate, as well as things that are important to me. So they're my Y and Z. But first and foremost, you have to know your X. So that's step 1. What's your X? Okay. Number 2, you need to do it or plan to do it as frequently and consistently as possible. Now, if you had to pick between frequently and consistently, go with consistently. But if you're really trying to do this and you really want to see this take off, frequently and consistently helps. So if you're going to say, I am blogging 2 days a week, you blog 2 days a week. Find a schedule, stick to it. A more ambitious schedule is not, come here. It's not automatically better. You don't have to do that in order to suddenly become bigger, better, faster. It's an option, and it doesn't guarantee that just because you're blogging 5 times a week doesn't mean you're going to get 5 times the audience than if you blog 1 time a week. But whatever you choose to do, you stick with it. Just stick with it. 2 times, 3 times, 1 time, 5 times, 4 times, whatever. Just stick to it. Try to do it more frequently than once a month, because at that point you might as well not even bother. So first thing, figure out what you're going to blog about. What's your X? What's your most frequent blog sphere? 2, figure out a schedule that you can stick to and stick to it. 3, understand, and this isn't the most critical, but you need to know this. Your first about 10 blog posts are going to be atrocious. You are going to look at them down the road, even 20 blog posts in. You'll look back at how you started, and you will aggressively be just, what garbage is that? Because over time, because of that consistency, your writing will improve. Now, if you're talking about, what do I blog about? That depends on your X. But however you choose to describe it, interface with it, and develop it, that's going to help your overall writing. I'll give you an example. So I'm currently in the middle of putting out a digital product. It's It's about, at the moment, I think it's 24 pages. It's probably going to end up being somewhere in the 30s. There will be sections you can write in. It's a whole thing. But it's based on material from several years ago. That was sort of the initial template. And I've kept some of those things in, mostly as sidebars and references, because they're good explanations. But the overall text I'm using, written by me 5, 7, 10 years ago, and it sounds nothing like me now. Nothing. The sentences are way too long. They're way too sloppy. There's no real consistent voice. And I don't know how I let it go out. I don't. Because if I read it today and it was, should I press post on this? I wouldn't. I'd take another day and I'd rewrite it. I'm much happier, and it's because I'm blogging. I'm much happier sitting down and the way I'm writing now. It's, 5, 10, 15 minutes worth of reading. It's a couple thousand words, but it's the best I've ever written because I'm doing it as frequently as possible. Sometimes it is 5 times a week, and I'm hoping to stick to that and get back to that because that's when I was having the most fun doing it. But lately it's been kind of hit or miss as other things get, need doing or get shaken out. But every time I sit down to write, and it's at least a couple times a week, I'm happy with it. So let's go over our 3 things. 1, you're going to figure out what you're going to blog about, and you're going to stay in that sphere more often than not. 2, you're going to come up with a schedule that you can actually follow, and you're going to stick to it. And 3, you're going to understand that this is a process that gets better over time, and your audience will grow over time. Don't just write one blog post and go, all right, 10,000 people show up day 1, because that just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And you shouldn't plan on it happening, and don't be upset when it doesn't happen, because it doesn't. It grows over time. You might get some, attention the first day because it's new, but it's a cumulative effect, just like regular writing in your manuscript, page after page, word after word, post after post. That's how you grow your email list. That's how you grow your setups. That's how you grow everything. One step at a time, over and over and over again. Excellent question. If that's unclear or you need more help, ask a question in chat, or if you're on YouTube and watching this, leave a comment down below and I'll break it down even further. Question number 5. What's the value in writing short stories? When this question came into my Twitter DMs, I rolled my eyes. And I'll tell you exactly why I rolled my eyes. There seems to be, and come here. There seems to be a whole rash of people on the internet who are not yet published, who are convinced somehow that they're going to be short story authors. And it's going to get them published, and it's going to get them those big, huge deals like all the other novelists. It's not. It's not. That's not where the money is anymore. The short story format isn't dead, but it's not the format I would use if you're coming to this art with a sole intent of being famous and financially secure. The value in writing short stories, because it is a different animal than writing a whole-ass novel, the value in writing a short story is to teach you a different way of communicating your ideas. Because they're short. You have less space. You have to work at this in a certain size. So it's the difference between, being an architect and being somebody who builds dollhouse furniture, or being a carpenter and building dollhouse furniture. The big stuff gives you a lot more freedom and a lot more opportunity, and the pieces are easier to manipulate. But when you're trying to make little doors on your Louis XIV dollhouse armoire, you're going to run into a situation where you've got to be a bit more careful and a bit more deliberate. The value in writing short stories is that it helps you engage with your storytelling structure, because despite being a shorter form than a novel, it's still all the same parts: character development, plot, world building, conflict, tension, emotion, dialogue, and theme. It's all those things, just smaller. But if you're looking at this in terms of I'm going to be a guy who gets published with short stories, not traditionally, you're not. Maybe it's some small press, but in terms of the big name, heavy duty waters you want to swim in, they're not going to look at short stories. They're going to look at you and go, "Oh, you didn't know." How nice for you, you internet first person. You got caught up in the advice and didn't follow through. Novels are where the money's at. And if money is your primary concern in this art, and if it is, it is. And if it's not, it's not. That's fine. But the money's in novels. Traditional publishing wants novels. Short stories are great. Side projects, small hustles, self-publishing. Awesome. Go for it. But don't roll up your short story anthology thinking that it's better than writing a novel or more pure or something. Because it's not. It's just not. It's a different animal altogether. It's valuable. It can teach you a lot of stuff. It can help you be a better writer overall. But don't look at that as the avenue towards that traditional publishing legitimacy that so many people are after, because it's just not. Okay? On we go. Ooh. Gentle advice. What can I do to get over the feeling that my writing success is taking too long? I think this is the thing I spend the most time per week talking about. Everybody's impatient. Everybody wants that success. It's taken me too long to write this, John. It's taken forever. I've been doing this for what feels like days, weeks, months, years. Okay. Yeah, I hear you. That makes sense. I get it. It can be frustrating. I have some follow-up questions. Why are you rushing a thing you've never done before? What's the hurry? You got a hot date? You got somewhere you got to be? These things take time. We're not talking about mowing the lawn out back. We're not talking about, throwing your wash in the dryer. This is an art. This is a thing that takes time. And if you want to do the good job you keep talking about, that's really important. Why? Why does it matter how long it takes? You wanted to do a good job, right? So who cares how long it takes? If you're saying that, oh yeah, but I don't want to be like old and stuff. I get this a lot from like really younger writers, like people in their early 20s, people at half my age coming out. I don't want to be old by the time I'm successful. Okay. I mean, that says an awful lot more about you than anything else. But why does it matter? Why is it? I mean, is it just the money? You want the money? Because there's better ways to earn money faster. You could, deliver newspapers, collect recycling, walk old people across the street and ask for tips. There's loads of different ways to make money faster. If you're looking at writing as though it's going to be this thing that provides emotional and psychological validation because it's creative and vulnerable, time doesn't matter. Because once you get that validation, if you allow yourself that validation, it doesn't matter how long it took, because once you have it, you tick the box, and like a light switch, it's either there or it's not. It's on or it's off. So why are you being impatient? If you're looking at this going, no, I want to be able to produce all my books. Okay, well, then that's something under your control. Because if you're wondering like, well, when's my career going to start? Are you writing? Guess what? If you're writing, hey, good news, your career started. And some people, get real cranky about it. Oh, no, it doesn't count until I'm published. Who said? Why? Why does it only count when you're published? Dinner only counts when, you make a multi-course meal? Why do you worry about how long it takes? Is it because you think, well, maybe it's because you think that other people get it faster, they're done sooner, so they must be better at it. Maybe that's what you think. Maybe you think this is a time speed thing, and we're back in elementary school where there were tests, and whoever was done first was allowed to go out to recess. This is not that. The amount of time it takes you relative to other people is not a reflection of how well you did whatever you've done. Your romance novel, your science fiction, your fantasy, your whatever you're writing is independent and separate from somebody else who wrote a totally different thing. Even if it's the same genre. You're a science fiction author, they're a science fiction author. They got done sooner. Great. Who cares? You're both going to have to do the same things. Query or go straight to distribution and selling, hustle for it, grow your list, do your marketing. And if you're about to say, yeah, but they're going to get a head start. There's not a finite number of readers. Consumers can buy multiple books. I mean, they will ultimately end up as just stacks next to their table or whatever, right? We've all heard about the TBR, the to be read list that just seems to grow and grow and grow. And that's stuff that people bought. Like I got books on my list that are multiple years old. You think the author's really upset that I haven't gotten to reading their shit in a timely fashion? Why are you rushing? Just why? Who cares how long it takes if you're doing a good job? If you don't think you're doing a good job, the speed at which you do it is certainly not going to matter to you. And if you want to do a better job, ask for help. But if you're just being impatient because you're being impatient, well, good news. There's a lot of hurry up and wait, especially if you go the traditional route, because you're going to go days, weeks, months even before you hear back from another person who's going to make a decision about the next step in the process. So what's the hurry? I mean, really, what are you looking for? Is it embarrassment? You're ashamed it took that long? Why? You don't have to throw a big parade, but at the same time, whose business is it that it took you 6 months and 2 days versus 6 months and 1 day? And do you really mean to suggest that if it took you 1 year and a day versus, 1 year and 2 days, you're somehow better off? Because if we follow that idea forward, if we just take that idea and we walk it around a little bit, do you mean to tell me that somebody who wrote a novel in a weekend is better at making a novel than you are? Why are we racing? The prizes don't get better if we're done sooner. It's all the same stuff. You don't get a bigger advance. You don't get more customers. You don't get the bigger marquee spot in the newsletter just because you were done sooner. Also, I don't know if you know this, no one cares how long it takes. Nobody. And I'll prove it to you. You're a reader. Do you ever stop and ask an author, how long does this book take you? And then use that as a way to judge the author you like? You think we're rolling up to Neil Gaiman and saying hey man, your shit didn't come out on a Wednesday, I'm out. No, that's weird. It doesn't matter. Do you walk around looking at book release date schedules and go, nope, I can't have a book that comes out on a Thursday? No, that's I've never met a human being that does that. Who cares how long it takes? Why have you attached importance to this idea that there's supposed to be a right amount of time to do a thing? One more example and then we'll move on. You know how sometimes when you're making dinner and you follow the directions in the recipe, but you go check the oven and the thing's not quite done yet, but the recipe says it was supposed to be in the oven 21 minutes, but it really needs 2 or 3 more minutes just to kind of finish cooking? Is that your oven's fault? Do you get mad at your oven? Do you get mad at the recipe? Do you feel like dinner is a failure because it needs 2 extra minutes at 400 degrees or something? No. You just throw it in the oven, you let it cook some more, and when it's done, it's done. The same is true here with our books. When they're done, they're done. What matters is, did you do your best? Did you get help when you needed it? Did you ask the right questions and apply the answers and push yourself to try hard? That's what matters. All this other stuff, though, that's just shit social media and the internet wants you to focus on. They want you to rat race each other because capitalism. I'm done sooner, I'm better. Like it's some kind of car race or something. Doesn't matter. There's not a finite amount of prizes here. This isn't a matter of coming in first, second, third, and then everybody fucking else. It's you did it or you didn't do it. You finished it or you didn't. Usually at this point I bring up the Olympic argument. And the Olympic argument is this. In the Olympics, there are 3 medal positions, gold, silver, and bronze, right? And the television coverage will make you think that the bronze medal is some kind of terrible catastrophe. Oh, he didn't get the gold, he got the bronze. The bronze means out of all the humans on the earth who could do this task, you're the 3rd best. Out of all the humans on the earth, you're the 3rd best. You are the 3rd fastest swimming human, the 3rd fastest jumping human, the 3rd fastest doer of stuff. Isn't 3rd good? You really going to complain? There's billions of people on the planet. You're number 3 on the list. And that's bad? Don't let time override your sense that you're accomplishing something. This is art. It takes as long as it takes. Are there any other questions from anybody in chat or anything? Oh, man. Heck of a night. Heck of a night.
Good night. Talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, robot voice. I appreciate that. That's not weird and off-putting at all. Anyway, questions? Anybody? Else we will march on. Let's go. On we go. If you have questions, fire away whenever. Hang on. Is it worth it to plan a possible series out of a project you're getting started? Worth it is my question. Do you mean like, is it a good idea to plan a possible series out of a project you're getting started? Not all all projects need to be series. That's some capitalism talking if you think it does. Sometimes some books are just single books, and that's fine. Sometimes things start as a single book and then later become a series. That's fine too. Not everything needs to be a series first. And here's the downside to always and only thinking in series. If your first book dies, you put it out there and it gets a terrible response. Whether it's self-published or traditionally published, whatever. It just doesn't get a response. But you intended and you planned and you laid these breadcrumbs and the story isn't really finished until 5 books from now. But after the first book, you are so radically discouraged, you're not going to produce the others. You just shot yourself in the foot. If the project you're getting started can stand on its own 2 feet. Because remember, every book in a series has to stand on its own 2 feet by itself anyway, because maybe that's the only book in the series somebody's going to have access to. You don't always have to conceive of everything as a series. I know the temptation in a series, oh my God, I could sell 1 book at $10, but if I had 5 books, oh, now we're talking about multiple books out there, more money coming in. Yeah, I guess. But you still only produce them 1 at a time. And the prior book sales are going to determine how or if you go forward at all. But it doesn't have to be a series in order for you to do that. You could write a single book and then go, people really liked it, so I'll make more of it. If I'm having an idea for another story with the same characters, is it okay? Is it okay to try and make both or just pick the better one? Okay, look, come here, right here. Okay, look. Every time you ask me a question that includes the words, is it okay? I'm always going to tell you, come here. I'm always going to tell you, I don't know, try it and find out. This isn't about permission seeking. If you think you can do it, give it a try. Maybe you can. Who knows? Some people can, some people can't. For me, speaking just myself, I can tell you that for me, doing whatever, I'm better off focusing on one thing and doing the shit out of it, doing it the bestest. But if I'm writing story number 1 and story number 2 pops in my head and I'm still digging story number 1, I'm going to finish story number 1. But that's me. If you're having an issue or a situation where in the middle of writing story 1, story 2 pops up and you're liking story 2 better, then maybe you want to drop 1 and go with 2. But if this is a situation where you are starting 1, then you get 2, then you're in the middle of 3, and here comes 4, and you can't seem to control the discipline required to sort out your ideas and just do 1 at a time, because you only have so many fingers. You only have so much time in a day. And I'm going to tell you, the more you try to do simultaneously, the less progress you'll make on any of them because you'll spread yourself thin. But if you want to do both, do both. You want to do all 3, do all 3. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to think of it in terms of a series first. I hope that answers your question. I'm going to shove more water in my face real quick. And then we're going to answer this question. It's a good question. Thank you for asking it. Question number 7. What's the price over purchasers debate? So this debate stems from the idea that when we're selling a book, doesn't matter what the book is, any genre, any nonfiction, fiction, doesn't matter. Which is more important? Is it the price we sell the book at, meaning we can expect this much money coming in? Because let's say I'm going to make numbers up. It's $5 a copy. So it's 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Is it more important that our money just be consistent based on the amount? Or is our purchasers, the number of people buying the book, more important? You'll see this, maybe 5 wasn't a great example, because you'll see this with things that are like $19.95 for a book. That way it won't matter how many people you have, because 19 is more dollars. Is the price with fewer customers more important than a number of customers at a lower price? A lot of publishers, traditional publishers, will kind of split the difference and say both are important because they're shitty humans and they're going to want to drag their feet and get the best of both worlds. They're not wrong, but dragging your feet and straddling the fence on this doesn't accomplish anything. Because you can't have both. Because if your book is, let's say, $23.99, you are going to see, unless you've got a masterful marketing campaign, you will see fewer customers than somebody who rolls out $2.99. Because your $23.99 price point is a disincentive for people who don't have $23.99. But this is the debate. Is it better to set a higher price, knowing that I'll have fewer customers, but they're paying more, or is it better to have a lower price and more customers? Now, of course, this assumes that there are customers who want the material. It's kind of a given in this debate that there are going to be, because if you don't have a customer base, if you don't have people lined up for the book in the first place, it doesn't really matter what your price is. But we're assuming here that you've got a hungry group of people who want to buy the book. But in terms of debating whether it's about price or the quantity of people, if you're asking me, I can see both sides, but I see both sides in different cases. If I'm trying to start a series, let's use that follow-up from the last question. If I'm trying to start a series, I want a lower price point because I want to get people on board. But if I'm writing something that is specific and isn't going to be part of a series, but I want it to stand out, and I know I can push it in a certain way marketing-wise, I'll have a higher price. I'll make it more of a premium thing, you know? there isn't, I don't think, a right side in this. I think there are better crafted arguments than others, but I don't automatically think that disqualifies half the argument. It is as a writer, no matter how you're going to publish this, especially if you're self-publishing it, but it doesn't, even if you're doing traditional publishing, it doesn't matter how you answer this. It matters that you do answer this. Because if you're self-publishing and you err on the side of price more than customers, then that's going to help frame your sales copy down the road and frame your marketing approach. If you're traditionally publishing, then you're going to worry about that price point slightly more than your customer number, because that price point is going to directly impact your payoff for your advance and how quickly money gets back in your pocket. There are different ways to approach both sides of this. You need to be aware of all of them. If any of that was unclear or you need more of that explained, let me know, and I will come back to this and re-explain it. Okay? Just in case you're sitting there in chat wondering what the hell I'm talking about. Good question, though. Question number 8. Is it wrong for tension to exist in a third act? Well, I've got a couple things to point out here in this question. One, I don't know what you're doing with the word wrong. Like, you're not losing invisible book points, right? Nobody's coming to take your keyboard away because you violated some great rule. It's not about right and wrong. It's about, does a thing work in this context? Does a thing work in this story or not? Not right and wrong, just, does this work? Does this not work? Second thing, tension. How much tension? What kind of tension? Are we talking about you haven't unveiled who the murderer was tension? Or are we talking tension like the serial killer's still on the loose? Or are we talking like tension in terms of like, how are they going to have that difficult argument about their relationship? Every kind of tension is different. The context for that tension is kind of necessary for this question, because if it's little tension, like how are they going to resolve the secondary character's emotional arc, versus, oh my God, the main plot isn't done yet, then we're running into a situation where we've got to figure out why we're moving into the third act with this question unanswered. That's the big issue here. It's not about right and wrong. It's, hey, why are you delaying the answer to this question? Either the question's unimportant and it's just kind of a throwaway gimme thing in the last couple pages. We'll hit the reader with an, oh yeah, kind of moment and wrap things up and move it along. Or we're dragging this out because we're trying to do something clever, like a false climax or something. It really depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. But it is not automatically wrong, and that does not mean the third act should be devoid of tension. It's not common. It doesn't frequently happen, but it doesn't mean it's bad if it does. It's not like tension stops the minute the climax hits or the minute the climax resolves. Most tension, the big tension, the plot, stops there. But you can still have other related secondary character arc tensions, subplot tensions, intrapersonal tension, all that. You can still have all those things exist in the third act. That's fine. But it comes down to what you're writing specifically and how you're writing it specifically. It's not like, again, not a light switch, not a binary thing we toggle on and toggle off. So it depends on what you're writing. So it's not wrong. It's just a matter of, is this working in the way I'm presenting it versus is it not working in the way I'm presenting it? It's a well-intentioned question, but I would have wanted more clarification with it. On we go to the next. How do I keep my first question number 9? How do I keep my first act from going on too long? Well, that comes down to knowing when your first act is supposed to stop. 99% of the time, your first act ends when the next action the character would take would be the plot. So whether that's the moment the person comes into the detective's office and says, I want to hire you to find out who murdered my dad, or whether it's the discovery of the dead body, or whether it's, the tiny little guy saying, I'll take the ring to Mordor, or anything like that. Your first act ends when the next thing, whatever it is, whether it's an action, a conversation, a reaction, whatever, when that next thing is plot, your first act ends. Now, maybe some of you out there are like, yeah, but I introduced the plot in the second paragraph of my first page. Okay, maybe it's time to reconsider doing that. Why? Because arguably you've got a 1-paragraph first act then. Now, could that be good? Could that work? Sure, it could totally work. I can't think of an example where it does, but that doesn't immediately disqualify it from being possible. You know, pigs could be flying right out my window. I don't know. It's night out. But you keep your first act from going too long because it stops when the plot shows up. And you do not have to resolve and set up everything before the plot starts. This is not a situation where we have to set everything out on the table before we can sit down to eat. What comes here and what works here is the plain and simple idea that over the course of the story going forward, we're going to get more stuff over time. You don't have to do that much setup because you still have this whole ass book, hundreds of other paragraphs, thousands of other sentences where you can still roll out all these details. Also, if you pack your first act really, really deep and then you don't say shit about it, but you move on into your second act, you are basically telling the reader, hey, reader, I want you to remember every single thing I just told you with perfect clarity because I'm not going to mention it again. And that's bad. That's just flat out not helpful for your reader. Because I don't know about you, but when I read things, there's a ton of stuff in my brain, and I'm going to forget something. And if the writer expects me to keep all these things, plates spinning in the air, and I start forgetting things, the next thing I do is I put the book down and I move on with my day. You keep your first act, not necessarily short, but you keep your first act organized by laying out what it is you're trying to do, following it along, and knowing that some of that stuff in your first act can probably get moved to your early second act, and the world's not going to come to a screeching halt. And the second act starts when the plot shows up. Keep those things in mind. Keep the story moving. Your first act length will sort itself out over time. Okay? Also, if you're looking for an even shorter shorthand way of saying it, every sentence is a camera. How much do you really want to put in the reader's brain before we get the story going? Practice, practice, practice. Write. It will over time sort itself out. Good question, though. Are there questions from anybody in chat? Somebody asked me the other day, as a podcast listener, where can I leave questions? The answer, by the way, is Twitter. It's right down in the bottom corner. Awesome John on Twitter. That's where you can leave all the questions you want. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Or if you're a Patreon person, upper corner, you jump on the Discord and just leave your questions wherever, and I'll be happy to answer them anytime. Great stuff. Any questions, though? Anything you want additionally followed up before we move into the last third of our last quarter of the questions? All right. Shall we move on? I'm just checking to make sure I got all my questions out of my DMs. Here we go. On we go. Round the home stretch. Question 10. If I'm not getting enough sales in one genre, I'm already bored. I'm already just ready to be irritated by this. If I'm not getting enough sales in one genre, is that a sign I should be writing something else? Look, come here. Lean into the camera. Come here. No. this goes back to sort of related to that argument about it's taking too long. Remember that? There seems to be this idea. I'm pretty sure I know where it started. It rhymes with bipedalism. But there seems to be this idea that if you're not getting like immediate sales super hyper quickly, you have to drop something like a hot potato and immediately move to the next thing. And there's a lot of like toxicity around the idea of like, you need to 10x your sales. And like just saying it makes me want to just regurgitate into my face. Just it's nasty. You don't need to 10x your sales. No one talks like that. You can't roll up and like, hi, Mom, how you doing? Oh, I'm 10xing those Christmas cookies. That's not a thing people say. If you're not seeing sales in a genre, first of all, you can't conclude that your poor sales are because of the genre you picked. Your poor sales, I don't know if you know this, your sales are poor because you suck at marketing, because your messaging isn't connected, because there's not enough messaging, because you're all over the place, because you just need to practice it or refine it or polish it or do more of it. It has nothing to do with the fact that, oh, it's because I'm writing a romance novel. Do you know how popular romance novels are? Do you know how popular most like sci-fi and fantasy is right now? Have you seen the television stuff? Have you seen the book things that are out? Even if you wrote what is functionally a dead genre like a Western, you could sell a Western. It's not the genre that's the reason for your poor sales. It's your branding. It's your marketing. It's how you're getting the word out. It's to whom you're getting the word out to. The sign that you should be writing something else, and that something else, by the way, should be marketing. But the sign that you should be writing more marketing stuff is that your sales aren't where you want them to be. It has nothing to do with your genre. Nothing at all. To immediately assume it's your genre is like saying, oh, my query letter got rejected. I better rewrite chapter 10. You don't know that chapter 10 is the reason why you got rejected. What got rejected was the query letter. Because if the query letter sucked on ice, they didn't read the manuscript. They just didn't. They don't have any interest to it. There's no reason to. But if you're not seeing sales, the answer isn't changing genre. The answer is changing your marketing. Make sense? Also, please never orbit this art thinking you need to like 10x your sales. That's ew. That's just ew. No, don't do that. On we go to hopefully not a question about 10xing things. Is there a way I can tell if my text is too stiff? I'll give you two. Two ways. Two ways work. Way number one. If when someone else reads it, they tell you it's stiff. Now, I understand that the part of this question is how can I tell if my stuff's too stiff? Partially, that's not for you to decide because you know what you meant when you wrote it. You know how something is supposed to sound when you read it, when you hear it in your head. So you know what you mean. So you know that you want to lean in on this word or how much pause a comma indicates or something. So you're a little biased when it comes to things like how the text reads. Part of that's resolved by handing it to somebody else and saying, hey, read this. Tell me what you think. The other way you can sort of assume a level of stiffness to your text is to look at how you're punctuating things and how long your sentences are. When I say punctuating, I mean more than just where the period is. I mean like commas. If you're running either a lot of commas per sentence or very, very few commas, but they're long sentences, it's possible, again, this comes down to something more specific than a general answer, but it's possible that you've got stiffness issues. Sentences are running a little too long. They're probably a little bit too similar to each other. Maybe they all start with the same couple words. Maybe it's always one or two words, then a comma, then the sentence keeps going. Maybe every paragraph starts with the same word. Maybe all the paragraphs are the same length. Anything like that can be indicative of stiffness. Part of that's under your control just by eyeballing the page and going, okay, what words can I change? What sentences can I bust up? What paragraphs can I restructure? But by and large, the idea of stiffness is also going to be informed by other people's feedback. Now, whether that's a beta reader or a critique partner or a writing coach or an editor, that's up to you. Just get some other human to look at it, and they'll give you the most clear idea as to whether or not it's too stiff. You reading it by yourself out loud can kind of help, but remember, ultimately, you know what you meant. So you're biased. We can't necessarily trust your reaction because you know that when you're reading a sentence, you know how it's supposed to sound, and that's the way you're going to deliver it. It's very difficult. Even if you do the old editing trick of working backwards, it's very difficult to sit there and catch your own mistakes like that. Because the other end of this is a hyper vigilance, let's call it, that, oh my God, everything's stiff. I have to tear everything apart. And then you sabotage yourself in a whole different other way because all of a sudden you're assuming everything's a problem and you're never really making forward progress because you're constantly over tinkering and micromanaging everything you're doing. Make sense? Good question. Shall we wrap this thing up? What I want to do first, I want to thank Sprecher Brewery for their very kind stuff. Go to spreckerbrewery.com, order their delicious, I can stand by their root beer. Their orange soda is delightful. There's a variety of different things. The cherry is also good too. Marvelous novelty beverages. Super recommend. Smooth as hell to drink. Delightful cold. Even good at room temperature. Big fan. Sprecher Brewery. Love them to death. Let's tackle our last question, though, before we get out of here. Gentle advice. Question 12. Do I worry about writers that are all doing the same thing? Meaning writers are writing in the same sort of voice. They're all doing the same kind of marketing stuff. They're all using the same kind of almost template style, fill in the blank. Your stuff looks indistinguishable from that person's stuff, looks indistinguishable from that person's stuff. How do we really stand out when everybody's doing the same kind of pitch format, the same kind of query letter structure, the same kind of writing, the same kind of genre with the same kind of foundational elements? Do I worry about that? Yes. Is it fixable? Oh, yeah. But the worry I have for it is that it's going to be a discouragement to others. That you out there, you're writing whatever you're writing, and you're looking and seeing how everybody else is writing what they're writing, and you're assuming on some level that if you want to do what they're doing as well as they're doing it, you have to do it how they're doing it. And that's not true. You don't have to. In fact, if you try and copy somebody else's method, you will not get their results. I'm not talking about like writing the same thing they're writing. I mean, if you're doing the same, like, oh, they wrote a newsletter that had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, and I wrote a newsletter that had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, you're not going to get the same result. You're different people making different art. You need to be doing something different than what they're doing. Not because, you need to beat them to the punch, but because you're different people and you're making different stuff, and presumably you're talking to different audiences at different times. My concern with this is that it's going to freak people out and overwhelm them, because if you start Googling, if you start looking around for how to market, and you talk to people on social media and you deal with the discouragement and the frustration and the vapidity and the sameness of everything, you'll get really overwhelmed and it'll feel like nobody has any answers. And they do. It's just that everybody's given the same answer to the different questions, that you just have to do it one way. There is no one single way to do any part of this process. What I recommend is different than what somebody else recommends. Maybe we're both right. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe I'm right, they're wrong. Maybe they're right, I'm wrong. What matters here is if a strategy, if a method, if an idea, the way you're doing it is working for you, then keep doing that. But recognize that when it stops doing it, and I don't just mean like, oh, one day you get 5 and not 6, but if it just flat out isn't working, Forcing it because that's what you see everybody else doing is not going to suddenly make it work. You have to be able to take every process in this, writing, editing, revising, marketing, whatever. Take every step in this and tailor it for yourself. So that way your art, whatever it is going to look different than somebody else's art, no matter who they are, no matter who you are, no matter what you're writing. It should look different. It needs to look different because you're different. I worry that all this sameness is going to affect how people produce art because they think, oh, well, that stuff's successful, so I better make my stuff look like that. You don't have to. You don't have to do that. There's no reason to do that. You can. It's a free planet. You have free will. I certainly can't stop you. But just because you see 10 people doing a thing one way and they're all sort of more or less clones of the other, think about how many times like there were Hunger Games ripoffs or the number of like different Star Wars-esque looking heroes journeys we get every once in a while. Your journey from point A to point B, from wherever you are to whatever your goal is, should be tailored and built specifically for you. Now, that doesn't mean you have to always radically try and do everything super different. Sometimes you're going to end up doing the exact same steps in the exact same way as somebody else, and that's fine. You're writing a newsletter, they're writing a newsletter. But here comes the individuation. Here comes the part where we tweak it and make it yours. Your newsletter content is different than theirs. The way you interact with people is different than them. The way you do this or don't do that or engage with this or engage with that, that's the part you tailor. Or you could skip it altogether. You can sell shit without a newsletter. You can collect email addresses and just hand sell books. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how we used to do shit way back in the day. Like, you can do all those things, but you've got to tailor it rather than be daunted or intimidated or bothered or annoyed or cynical about the ideas of, oh, I've got to do it all the same way as everybody else, because you really don't. That's not how this needs to be. That's not how this works. Okay? Do I worry about it? Yeah, but not because it's boring. I worry about it because too many people are looking at this and saying, that's the method. And it's not. It's not the method. Your book, your way, doing the best you can with whatever your chosen path is or whatever your discovered path is, will do fine. It might not do as well as somebody else, but they're a different person doing a different thing, approached with different stuff. You have to let them do their thing their way, and you have to let you do your thing your way. If you're not happy with the results you're getting, that's a different issue. If you're not happy with how easy or difficult something is to do, that's a different issue. That's not about what somebody else is doing, because that has nothing to do with you at this point. If you're not happy with your results, ask for help. If you're not happy with the ease or difficulty of accomplishing something, get some help. Change your method, change your tactic, change your thinking, change something, change multiple somethings, and you'll get closer to where it is you want to be. But you're not going to do that just by following the rest of the herd doing exactly the same thing. You're making art. We're not making widgets. Your stuff does not have to look exactly like the other person's. Your stuff looks like yours. Their stuff looks like theirs. In the end, whatever the end is, in the end, you will either get to where you can be based on what you have done and how you are doing it, or you will quit and walk away. Not everybody's going to get to the big magic promised land of how things were in the 1990s, let's say, because those days are long gone. Stop using the old stuff as a benchmark for how it could be today, because that's just not accurate. Figure out where it is you want to go. Figure out the route you are comfortable and capable of taking to get there. And then figure out what steps you can consistently and regularly take to get you to that goal, wherever it is, whatever it is, okay? One thing at a time. One step at a time. Over and over and over until you get where you want to be. And if you get there and you realize you still want to keep going, then change your goal and keep going. But your route, your avenue, your effort is going to look universally completely different than somebody else's. And that's the best part of this. It really is. I need you tonight, now, here, tomorrow, listening to this, whenever. I need you to let that in your head. How you do what you do is up to you. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. If it's working for you, keep doing it. If it's not, change it up. Just do your best every chance you can. Okay? It's a great question. Are there any other questions? Because we flew through this tonight, which is fine and well and good, and I don't mind at all. But are there any other questions from anybody out there? Big things, little things, any things. It is good to be back. Thank you for having me back. I was really concerned that I'd be talking to the brick wall tonight. I'm very thankful that I'm not. It's nice to be back. There's always more. I do definitely want to thank Sprecher for just being really good sports with all this. If I don't really do Coke and Pepsi so much anymore, for a number of reasons. Sprecher is now my soda of choice. And if you're looking for something that feels familiar while at the same time being new, if you're looking for something satisfying that's not necessarily what everybody else is used to, just give them a shot. Would you please support a good business, support good people? They're great people. They've got an amazing product. I strongly recommend it. The same way I recommend hoodies, bathrobes, sex workers, and steno pads. Sprecher Brewery. They're goddamn awesome. Shall we get out of here? Let's get out of here. To the outro. Everybody for being here. It meant the world to me. I was really worried tonight was going to be a dud, and it most certainly was not. And I'm ever so thankful for every single one of you here. I'm grateful, and I'm truly appreciative. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for letting me talk about Sprecher. Thank you again to Sprecher. You guys rule. I'm totally ordering more cases in a minute. Just cool. The next time I'm here answering questions will be October the 5th. That's next Wednesday, right here at 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, the best things you can do if you're looking to check out more content, jump over to patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better and check out the Patreon. $2 a month gives you a ton more content and a ton more detail like this. This chat, of course, just like everything else, will be up on the YouTube channel. YouTube.com/John Adamus. Sometime in the next 15 hours, YouTube is notoriously slow. I think it's powered by gerbils and string. So it'll be there. And don't forget to check out everything else at johnhelpsyourwritebetter.com. If in the entire interim you have questions, by all means ask. I'm over on Twitter at AwesomeJohn, awesome_John_. And I will talk to you guys very, very soon. All power to all people. Be safe. Love each other. Take care of yourself. We'll talk soon. See ya!